I saw the article, and here's the problem. Everybody knows that Pope Frankie is smoking liberal weed, okay? I mean, liberation theology, South America, Jesuit, this was predictable. This was really predictable. We know that Francis would have simply been burned at the stake by popes only 300 years ago. Would have been burned at the stake. And that says a lot. That says everything that should need to be said about sola scriptura versus sola ecclesia. Sola ecclesia doesn't work. Not just on a pragmatic level, but the fact of the matter is, any honest person can look at history and go, wow, there has been a lot of change of these people who claim to possess apostolic tradition. But here you have a situation where you've got two living popes, and no person can honestly look at Ratzinger, look at Benedict and Francis and say, yeah, these guys are on the same page. No, they are not. They're not in the same book. They're not in the same continent. But here's the problem. There are lots of folks out there in the quote-unquote Christian web who just love jumping on the most recent thing that Francis says, and they can say whatever they want, and they can spin it any way they want to, because they are never, ever, ever, ever going to be sitting in front of 1,000 people with a sharp Roman Catholic apologist at the other microphone, equal time having to answer questions. So you don't have to worry about what the context of what the Pope said was or anything else. You can just throw it all out there and spin it the way you want to, and you don't have to worry about it. That's not my situation. And so I think it is relevant, the Pope's comments that were just released regarding proselytization and conversion and gospel preaching and things like that. But let's keep a couple things in mind. This is not an official papal pronouncement. This is not the Pope exercising his magisterial authority. And the problem is, almost all of the comments were based upon Google Translate. Now, I don't know if you have ever used Google Translate. Google Translate's really good at some things, and it's really bad at others. And, for example, it's really bad at Latin. It'll recognize Latin. It won't translate it very well, but there you go. So what you've got is based upon people's interpreting phrases that come out of Google Translate. Now, do I think that the gist of what he was saying has come through? Yeah, pretty much so. But does that mean that we need to be careful and say, if what the Pope is saying is this, then it might mean this? Yeah, it's, again, what the Pope says to reporters on an airplane is important. When the Bishop of Rome addresses the issue of homosexuality on an airplane and says, who am I to judge? That is important. It does not have the same level of authority as a papal document. And if the Pope comes out and says, I declare, announce, and define as the successor of Peter that homosexuality is a natural and acceptable orientation and behavior, which is about what the German bishops did a few weeks ago, but they don't have the authority to do that. Okay, that says something. But we need to recognize the difference. Okay, just fairness demands it. There's just not a lot of people that are overly concerned about fairness anymore. So, just a couple quotes from it. Speaking of having Jewish and Muslim friends, we are all the same, all children of God. Well, that's Frankie. Frankie said that about atheists. Francis does not have a theology that recognizes alienation from God by sin. He really doesn't. I mean, he has to sort of tip his hat to the fact that Rome used to, but I think the man minimally is clearly an inclusivist on the industrial strength side of inclusivism. And if you don't know what inclusivism is, an inclusivist fundamentally, and there's all sorts of different takes on it, but an inclusivist fundamentally believes that God will include in his grace anyone who responds in any positive fashion toward a God concept. In other words, you don't need to know about Jesus. A Muslim's faith in Islam, they may not know who the real Jesus is, but they're still having faith in God. That'll be accepted. Buddhist faith toward whatever, that'll be accepted. So an inclusivist would say that any positive religious behavior, and so an atheist that has his kids baptized, the inclusivist says, going to heaven. And that's what Francis said when the young boy asked about his daddy. Well, he had his children baptized, therefore, clearly, go to heaven. So minimally, he's an inclusivist. And obviously, an industrial strength inclusivist and a universalist who believes everyone's going to be saved. There might be a period of purgation, or whatever, but everyone's eventually going to be saved. No, it's going to be no punishment, no separation from God. The gap between the two is not that big. It's not that huge. And so I think he's probably a universalist, but minimally an industrial strength inclusivist. He's as much as said it. Has he placed that in a dogmatic teaching? No. But is the man himself constantly making comments that indicate that is his personal belief? Yeah. Now, the old-style Roman Catholic apologists say, but he'll never teach it as Pope. So you can't go to what the Pope is saying. You can't go to the Pope's commentaries on what's going on in the world, anything else. You can't trust any of that. It's only if he says, I declare, announce, and proclaim. That really makes infallibility completely worthless. And you know it. And you know it. So anyways, we are all the same, all children of God. He plainly does believe that. It didn't occur to me, and it doesn't have to be like saying to a boy or a girl, you are Jewish, you are Muslim, come be converted. Come be converted. We are not in the times of the Crusades. And he talks about lining Muslims up and having a priest and a baptismal, which obviously isn't exactly a baptismal in the biblical sense, but that's another issue. And a soldier. And this is the time of the Crusades. That type of thing actually happened. This is terrible. That's not where we are today. So that's part of the idea of conversion in his mind, is forced conversion. In front of an unbeliever, the last thing I have to do is try to convince him. Never. Now that's where most people are going, so what were the apostles up to? What was the purpose that they had in going into the marketplace and engaging in debate and that type of thing? I don't know. But listen, never bring the gospel by proselytizing. Now, what does that mean? Well, one thing we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it means is it's not what happened in the Crusades on either side. So you've got that, but that's not really happening. Okay, in some Muslim contexts, you might make the argument, but that's not really happening. So he's reacting to something modern. And so a lot of people have just automatically assumed that his use of the term proselytization is the same as our use of the term proselytization. That we're saying the exact same things. And I think that's pushing it a little bit. You might want to try at least to allow him to define his perspective on it some and interpret it in light of his. If someone says they're a disciple of Jesus and comes to you with proselytism, they are not a disciple of Jesus. The church does not grow by proselytism. But he does also say toward the end, proselytism is not done. The church does not grow by proselytism. Pope Benedict had said it. It grows by attraction, by testimony. Football teams proselytize. This can be done. Political parties can be done there. But with faith, there is no proselytism. And if someone says to me, but why? Read the gospel. This is my faith, but without pressure. So, obviously, the Pope does not have a biblical view of man, does not have a biblical view of the gospel. He is far left. But I do wonder what it was like. I do wonder what it was like. I don't remember when this came out. Let me see. Updated December 19th. So what was it like in the offices of Catholic Answers on the morning of December 20th? You can just see everybody coming in around the conference table, looking at each other. And so who was it? Was it Tim Staples? Who was it that spoke up first? All right, guys, what are we going to do now? Because what we were based upon, the Pope just said, shouldn't be doing. So, how are we going to handle this one? How are we going to spin this baby? Well, I'm sure the Google Translate element was part of it. I haven't listened to Catholic Answers in a while. But wow, it is wow, a rough day. Rough day to be a Roman Catholic apologist. There's just no two ways about it. And there you go.